I'm back, boys and girls. Let's talk about some real football players. We got the offensive linemen in the house tonight. Let's see what we got going on tonight. Hit it, boys. Hi. I missed everybody last week. Thank you to Jacob Morley and Mike Kawano and MJ Hurley for filling in for me last week talking about tight ends. My sum up of that episode is they need one. So there you go. That is my thought on that. Welcome to the Gold Zone, everybody. I'm Jacob Westendorf. I'm your host live in the Game On Wisconsin studios here. You can follow me on Twitter at Jacob Westendorf. But I want to encourage everybody to follow that link that is going on below Jacob Morley's face. And that is the Green Bay Draft Guide. Go ahead and pre-order that. Get yourself $9.99, $8.99, $7.99, depending on the promo code you use. And find yourself 225 profiles set right for your Green Bay Packers. And we're going to talk about some offensive linemen tonight that could fit your Packers because they have some specific types. And we'll get into all of that stuff here. My co-host tonight, as always, he's beneath me here, which he is in stature and handsomeness level and football knowledge and basically everything. Jacob Morley is joining the show tonight. Jake, how are we feeling?
I'm feeling good, man. I this is one of my favorite shows that we do throughout the process because I don't know very much about offensive line play. It is something I've never coached. It's something I've never played. It's something that I get confused about when I try to figure out who's good and who isn't. So we're super stoked to have kind of the offensive line guru amongst Packers Twitter with us here tonight in Owen Reese. And Owen, thanks for joining us, man. And we're happy to have you.
Yeah, guys, thanks for having me. This is cool. I've done some work with Jacob in the past on podcasts and in draft guides and stuff, and kind of taken a step back from that this year, but still been fun to keep track, and always a big fan of advocating for plus size athletes. So
absolutely something that we have here. And, Jake mentioned that he didn't play offensive line. Jake, where did you play now? I don't think we've ever had that conversation.
So I played a little bit of college football, and I played a corner and safety when I got to that level. But at the high school level, I played a lot of everything. I played quarterback, running back, receiver, linebacker, defensive back. Just small town in North Dakota, and kind of a big fish everywhere. In a little pond. Big fish in a little pond. I got to college and realized how good I was not. So that's kind of how that went.
Kind of what happened, I suppose, with me. I went to a small school. About 70 people were my graduating class, and that was about the average size. I played Ironman football. I was a offensive guard, center, depending on the year, and defensive lineman. Occasionally played some linebacker as well. And then once, like you said, once it came to recruiting time, I started looking at some of the boys they had on the offensive line. That I was a 230-pound offensive guard when I graduated high school.
Scrappy.
And the first day of practice, they said you were going to go up against a guy who was 315. It's like, okay, that's probably not going to happen. So that was the end of my football career, and that was okay. But tonight, like you guys mentioned, when it comes to offensive linemen, if this guy says he's good, I'm prone to believe him. That's Owen Reese, former grad assistant at UW Whitewater. And, of course, did some stuff for the East-West Shrine Bowl this year, which was pretty cool. And then, like you mentioned in the past, she said TV Draft Guide with me and was also one of my Pack-A-Day podcast partners. Before all that, as far as I know, the greatest offensive lineman in the history of Carroll University. So, Owen Reese, welcome to the show. Like Jake mentioned earlier, so just give us a little bit of your football background. I know I explained it a little bit, but go a little more in depth for that for me, please.
Yeah, so I'm from people listening from Wisconsin are familiar probably with Adams Friendship High School. It's about a half hour north of Wisconsin Dells. Born here, graduated here.
Trying to get on.
Was lucky enough to get the chance. I was a very okay high school player, but I was big. And so I got the opportunity to go play collegiately at Carroll University in Waukesha. It's a Division III school just outside of Milwaukee. And loved it. Had a ball for 4 years. I played guard and center, and was okay. By the time I was a senior, I got to be pretty okay. But But then after that, graduated and didn't really have much of a plan. I got my degree, but I didn't have a job lined up out of school or anything. And so I moved back home for 4 years, did some coaching, substitute teaching. I worked for our newspaper. I worked in our courthouse. And my offensive coordinator from Carroll then got the offensive coordinator job at Whitewater. And they had an offensive line grad assistant leave pretty late in the summer to take a high school job. And it kind of gave me, he's like, hey man, like, I know you wanted to get into scouting. This is the best way to do it, is to work in football. It's this huge huge experience and a lot of information for you. And so I went and did that in 2019 and was lucky enough to coach Quinn Miners, which was pretty incredible in itself. And then went to the national championship game and lost. And then obviously in 2020, unfortunately, we didn't have a season due to the pandemic. And then I graduated, and now I am back in Adams. But worked at was a scout for the College Gridiron Showcase last year, and then this past fall and this draft cycle, have been working with the East-West Shrine game and are currently getting ready for the 2023 class. So doing a lot of background and stuff for that. So that's kind of my long story short. But yeah, I usually hang around with fat dudes. I watch them. That's like, even the years past, go to the Senior Bowl. Like, I'm probably going to watch the linemen. Like, that's all I really do. So I feel pretty comfortable there.
So take me through that just real quick, because obviously I think a lot of people think offensive line play is just like cookie cutter. You're blocking the dude across from you. Like, you either are able to do that or you're not. So when it comes to looking at, somebody that you're watching play, how do you kind of determine who's good and who's not? Or what do you think, like, what they're good at and what they're going to be good at and what they're not going to be good at and stuff like that? How do you figure that out?
Yeah. So certainly don't have like any exact science for it or anything. But the big thing is being able to very quickly identify like how that player, like what his style is or what his identity is, right? Like, if you're watching, we'll talk about here in a little bit, right? But like, if you're watching John Runyon Jr., right, when he was at Michigan, you can very quickly see like, this dude's not a tackle, but he's a good offensive lineman. He's being asked to play there, and he's very smart. He's very heady. He's not the most physically dominant dude, although he did end up testing pretty well, right? But he doesn't win because of his physical stature, right? Like, he wins because he's very smart. He positions himself well, and he's athletic. Okay. If you're watching Orlando Brown, you can pretty well see like, this dude doesn't win because he's quicker than everyone, right? Like, he's huge, he's big and physical, and he moves people around, and that's how he wins, right? So that's one of the first things I do, try to get a feel for the player that way. Then, right, like, obviously most of the stuff, it's a little different. Like, I did some recruiting stuff in college, but for the most part, right, it's always been the college to pro projection. And then at that point, then you kind of start looking for some traits, right? Like, how athletic are they? Do they have any potential positional versatility? Can they stop an inside move? Not so politely, Jason Spriggs, right? Some stuff like that, where you can, like, all the athleticism in the world doesn't matter if you can't play, but also you need to be able to play. Or if you can play, but you can't move, that doesn't work either, right? So like anything, there's always kind of a balance, but usually trying to find, because like, pretty quickly you can tell once you once you tell how they were going to win, you can tell how they're going to do that, right? And then you can see if that's going to project or not. So I think that's one of the big things. That probably sounds super like cop-outy, but the big things, you try to find the style of the player and then see how they're going to win, because not very often does someone get to that level of college success and they're going to move to the pros if they can't replicate that, right? Like, not very many dudes get through and they're like, well, I'm just this absolute mauler run blocker. And they get to the NFL and he's like, well, actually, like, I'm just a pass pro specialist, right? Like, you're going to continue to win how you've been winning your whole life, because that's what you do and that's what you're good at. So if you can like negate the weaknesses or kind of help like build up the weaknesses, but as long as you can remain good in that thing, right? Like, humans are people of habit, right? Like, if you're going to, like, I win because I'm a run blocker, I'm going to continue to take pride and work on my run blocking while trying to catch up my pass protection to where it's no longer a liability, or vice versa, right? But once you get a gauge for a guy, then you can really kind of project them moving forward. And that's kind of a big part of what we try to do.
Yeah. And I vividly remember last year we were talking about Jake Hansen, and he was going against Derek Brown, the pick from Auburn. And then somebody was like, well, he's not getting any movement against Derek Brown. And you're like, well, he's not going to. Like,
Yeah.
That's just not that's not what Jake Hanson's going to do, and asking him to do something like that just isn't going to be something. And that's something I think that again gets lost when it comes to general discussion of offensive line play, because I think in high school, a little different now. I think there's some more introduction of the zone blocking schemes and stuff in the high school game, but for the most part, it's hat on a hat and who can move the guy across from them. Again, for the most part, I'm generalizing. So obviously not that way. I remember, when I was being recruited by Loris and they were trying to teach me about zone blocking, and I was just kind of like, this isn't anything I've ever heard of before, like not on this level at least. So it was different. So let's talk a little bit before we get into the draft prospects, because the Packers offensive line we were talking about before, they released Billy Turner earlier this week. And I'm bummed about that. I'm always bummed when an offensive lineman gets cut. But Turner's a guy who played above average right tackle, average guard, average left tackle for them, maybe slightly below average left tackle while he was in Green Bay, and basically played every position except left guard and center while he was here. And he was good. He was a really good signing for the Packers. They just need to kind of pinch some money and do things that way. So what that means now is next year, assuming relative health, right? Assuming relative health to start the season, David Bakhtiari is their starting left tackle. Josh Myers is their starting center. And that's the only positions that we know for sure are going to be the starters in those spots. John Runyon, we talked about, he's probably going to start, but we don't know where. We don't know who the right tackle is. And by extension, we don't know who the right guard is. It's all kind of up in the air at this point right now. My first question that I want to lean into is a guy who played a lot of football this year for the team, and that is Yosh Neyman. And Yosh was a guy who, he's been a darling. I know since he was an undrafted free agent, a lot of people said he was like the Packers' 10th or 11th, whatever number after that draft selection. It was like getting another draft choice along the offensive line. Finally got to see him in some action this year. And on the surface, didn't struggle. Or it wasn't a liability, let me say that much. But at the same time, if you watch with a little bit closer of an eye, the Packers did do some things differently because Yosh was playing left tackle instead of Bakhtiari, which, I mean, obviously Bakhtiari is one of the 3 best left tackles in the world when he's healthy. The question I have for you is, they didn't play him in the playoff game. They put Billy Turner at left and obviously Dennis Kelly at right. That question or that decision has been second guessed and first guessed, honestly, several times since it happened. But what's your take on Neyman, as now he's presumably going to have to learn how to wipe his ass with the other hand and play right tackle next year? One, is that something he's capable of doing? And two, what was just your overall assessment of his play this year?
Yeah, I was actually pretty impressed. It's probably a flaw of mine, but I always get super skeptical when people that I don't necessarily always trust their opinion, right? Like, or I don't have any reason to, when all I see on Twitter for like 2 years is, oh, Yosh Neyman's so good. Like, why isn't he playing? He's so good. I just want to see him get a chance. I was like, well, sure. Like, we'll see. Right. Like, for a long time, that was Lucas Patrick, who I've warmed up to, but like everyone loved Lucas Patrick. And I'm like, why have they not cut this guy yet? Right. So like, he was better than I expected. He did play both sides at Virginia Tech, which I think will help ease it a little bit. Was primarily a left tackle there. I believe his senior year he played right, but had played left up until that point. The difference between, I'm trying to figure out how to articulate this, the difference between like a competent swing tackle and a legitimate starting tackle is probably not like a ton, but that shouldn't prohibit the Packers from looking, or like having Yosh Neyman on the roster should not keep them from being, if they're infatuated with Daniel Falele, or, which I understand like doesn't really fit their size thing, but it's just such an anomaly, or someone, Bernard Ryman, right? Someone like that really, really like makes the needle move for them. He has no reason to not like look at the position. Now they may see, well, we don't really have a need at right tackle any longer. We really view edge as a bigger one, or vice versa. But to me, he's not a reason to not upgrade the spot. Though it's very clear. Like, I think if you're going to keep a third tackle, I think a pick and Neyman would be above Dennis Kelly probably. But I'm fine with him being penciled in at right tackle or Dennis Kelly, however, but neither of those two should keep Green Bay from looking for one. Because even, like I said, even if you simply have Neyman as the swing guy, the third guy, him not being awful and like this position does not need to be upgraded is pretty sizable. So I liked him. It will be tough. Like transition, like that's the one thing. And you and I have talked about this before, and you kind of mentioned it. And I've seen recently Duke Manyweather is really coming for people on this. The switch from left to right is a big one. If you have an entire offseason to get used to it, obviously it's not such a daunting thing, but it's just the simple like matter of reps, right? So I played right guard primarily most of my football career, or at least like from like my junior year of high school on, right? So imagine like I couldn't tell you how many reps of football I took in practice or in games at right guard. Thousands, tens of thousands, right? Like however many it was. And so every single time you walk up to the line and you get your foot stagger, everything is comfortable, everything's at home. This is what I'm used to. This is what I know. And even to ask me to switch to left guard, which again, you're doing the same job, just opposite. You could do it like in a pinch, but you don't feel comfortable doing it, or it's certainly not second nature, and it's not without thought or without trepidation or the. You might be able to do the same job, but it's going to be half a step slow, or it's like processing different. Like you're looking at a mirrored image, basically, right? So like, I don't think it's some death knell. Like I don't think that like he can only play left tackle. Like that's, I mean, you can teach someone to play the other side, but it's certainly not quick, and it's not. There's no guarantee that he'll ever be as good on the right as he was on the left, right? And I think that would be fine. That still might be a passable thing, but if fans are like, oh well. He sucks now. Why do we try to swoop? Why do we try to move him? Why is he not right? Like there's something too. Like imagine I always think of like Greg Oden, right? He broke his wrist during his freshman year at Ohio State, and he learned to shoot free throws left-handed so he could shoot, and he became okay at it. And like I'm sure if he continued to do that for years, he would have eventually gotten pretty good. But like he's never going to be as good of a shooter as he was right-handed. Like no matter how many times you do something, if it's not your like primary thing. So. To get off my soapbox, I think he'll be fine. I think Green Bay should still look for upgrades if possible, or at the very least, like another body there. The transition is hard. It's not undoable, but it's certainly shouldn't be glossed over, or it shouldn't be taken for granted. And that's where I think the competition or support of a safety net underneath him would be important, not only for him, but for the team. Just be like, well, like, that's hard. So we're another opportunity, but that's kind of it. Like that's where like I don't think that like Billy Turner being able to play decent at left tackle in the playoffs is nuts. After like didn't play the whole season on the left side at all, hadn't played left tackle since probably the previous playoffs, right? And then he comes in, he's just like not a liability. Like all of a sudden, like that's insane to me. So I would not expect that on Neyman. That's probably my answer. I think like they should not keep looking in the draft or in free agency. I think he could. I probably think that like he's best served.
We got Owen cutting in and out here, so we're going to try and go with that. So, Jake, let's go real quick, just as we're trying to get Owen back here. There he goes. Owen, you stopped there for a second. So you think Neyman's best served getting some reps through the offseason essentially is what we got toward the end there. But, Jake, go ahead.
Yeah, I think with the Packers, what they always try to do is give themselves options at the offensive line. And just looking at it from like a team building perspective, how they want to approach this next season. I think we're going to learn quickly how they view some of these guys, right? Like I think the layer we didn't even get to is Elton Jenkins. And I think Elton Jenkins will probably be, and if I had to guess right now, it would appear that the release of Billy Turner would indicate to me that they really think Elton Jenkins is going to be the right tackle of the future. And honestly, Elton might have something to do with that as well when he's coming up on a contract and seeing the dollar signs that are different between guard and tackle. He might be saying, hey, I showed you I could play tackle last year. I want to come back and I want to be the right tackle for this football team. That could absolutely be the case. But kind of going with what Owen is saying too, I think you look at this team and you look at the way the Packers have built this offensive line. They love versatility. They love giving themselves options across the offensive line. They do cross-train guys quite a bit. So the thing for me is, Yosh might be the guy that holds down the fort until Elton gets back, and if Yosh just grabs that right tackle spot. And, the other thing we did talk about with Yosh is like maybe he's better at right tackle. He could be. Who knows? But if he grabs that spot, I think they would want to put Elton back at left guard then. And then it's like, well, I think John Runyon Jr. is probably your best guard that you have right now. So would they move him to the right side? So it's like all this stuff. So I think it's going to be so interesting. And last year, this is one of the most fascinating camp battles I thought they had. Not necessarily from watching these guys, but just like where they're lining them up and where they want them to play. And all of that is to say, like what Owen is talking about, if there's a guy sitting there at 28 that you love at right tackle, take his ass and play, and and keep Elton at guard. So I think, what they will do will be fascinating, but I think that's a good segue into kind of talking about, if we have Owen back here even, is like, what do the Packers like? What do the Packers typically like to pick at the offensive line position? Because, going back with what I said at the beginning of the show, I'm not good at scouting offensive linemen. And the Packers they are good at it. And so typically when they take someone, I think last year before they took Royce Newman, I even tweeted, I was like, all right, what all pro offensive linemen are they going to take here in this round? Because that seems to kind of be the sweet spot. And obviously that's high praise for young Royce Newman. But he played well, all things considered, his rookie year. And I think there's stuff to like there. So, Owen, just from your perspective, what is something that the Packers, or some things that the Packers look at an offensive lineman and kind of makes you think that's a Packer?
Yeah, I think one of the easy thing, and shout out our buddy Justice Mosqueda was the first person that turned me onto this, I don't know, 4 or 5, 6 years ago now. Don't tell him I said that. Was the prior tackle experience. I think that's a big thing that with Josh Myers, they finally broke that mold a little bit of taking a guy high that wasn't a tackle in college, or at least at some point. But then you look and you're like, oh, well, Josh Myers is actually like a 4-star tackle recruit out of high school. And we're like, okay. But that's a big part. They very much prefer blindside tackle experience. I think even Josh Sitton played right tackle at UCF for a left-handed quarterback type of thing. So that was a big part. TJ Lang was a left tackle at Eastern Michigan. I think in part of that, I've talked to some Packers scouts about that, and they kind of poo-poo it, or they kind of shake it off. And I think the general consensus, well, it's kind of just where they put their best players or whatever. I do think the athleticism is a huge part of it though too. And the athletic metrics that, some guys have put together, that's a big part. I think the 3-cone is a huge part, right? Being able and just once you realize too, what the Packers, now this has not always been the case, but especially now given their scheme, right? This wide zone scheme, you really need to be able to get out and run, right? And be athletic and be mobile. And that's where I think a lot of times being that tackle, even John Runyon, right? He was 6'4.5", maybe, and kind of a sawed off guy. But to play guard for the Packers, you don't need to be, a freak length guy or anything. And that's what we see there. So really just the mobility, and then the
all right, we keep running into some issues here. So there we go. Yeah, Owen's kind of cutting in and out here, Owen. So let's kind of get to brass tacks here, because I did tell you we'd only do this for I did tell you we'd only do this for a half hour. So you were talking about some of the things the Packers like. You're also at the Shrine Bowl this year. So who are some guys that came from the All-Star game that you were not in charge of, but a part of, that you think might fit in Green Bay for this upcoming season?
There are 4 4 or 5 that really kind of stand out. I don't know if they'll all be prioritized or not, but those are so the 2 were guys that I actually had in the ACC first scouted were Alec Lindstrom and Zach Tom. Alec Lindstrom, if the name sounds familiar, is Chris Lindstrom's little brother from the Falcons. Their dad played in the NFL. And he and Zach Tom, Zach Tom played left tackle the last 2 years at Wake Forest, but was a center prior to that. Those are the 2. They're both very athletic. Zach Tom tested out stupid good at the combine. He's a guy that screams Green Bay Packer to me. He is, I think, probably strictly an interior guy only. Get you out of a game. home. And then the other couple are Xavier Newman-Johnson from Baylor at guard. I think he could play guard or center. Very athletic, quick mover, 6'1", 305 pounds. So he's a little smaller, but moved really well, had a lot of juice down at the game. And then Luke Watenberg was a center at Washington. He's another guy. I think he could play guard or center. He's got to put some weight on. I think he was 291 at the Shrine game. So he's a guy that could stand to eat a little more and lift a little more. But he's a guy that moved real well. And then the last one I actually brought up, we haven't seen his pro day numbers, and I don't believe he was invited to the combine, which I was kind of surprised about. But Gene DeLance, the right tackle from Florida, is about 6'5", 302 pounds or so. I think he's a guy that could be a candidate to switch inside. Very long arms, moves pretty well too, and I just not the supernatural pass protector at right tackle that I think you'd hope to be to keep him at tackle in the NFL. But he's a guy that'd be the fifth guy to me. Those are the guys that kind of screamed out to me. That would be Green Bay's types, or Green Bay, or the Rams, or San Francisco. Some of those that kind of archetype. But those five. So Lindstrom and Tom probably are centers, and then probably Xavier Newman-Johnson would be a center for the Packers as well. Watenberg at about 6'4", he and Tom could probably play guard if needed, with some added weight. And then the last one being Gene DeLance, I think could be a tackled inside convert. So only out of those, Lindstrom and Xavier Newman-Johnson, I believe, are the two that haven't played tackle at some point. So Watenberg, I think, played everywhere at Washington. And so those are the guys that jumped out, had good weeks, are athletic, and then should kind of fit. And then we also mentioned, I guess, to cheat to get a sixth, Cordell Volson from North Dakota State will not have the athletic profile that the Packers normally look at, but he does have tackle experience, and I do think he projects inside. Also ran a bunch of zone stuff at North Dakota State along with their gap power stuff. So he would be a kind of a wild card, but
okay, so a couple guys there towards the end here as we get Owen kind of just still cutting in and out here. The internet does not want him to be great for whatever reason. That may very well be. Well, Owen, if you can, you can still hear me because now you're back again. Of course, appreciate your time. You can follow him on Twitter at Reese Draft. Be sure to check out some of the stuff. He has a bunch of different things that are coming on, pro wrestling jokes in general. And how would you describe those memes that you like so much? Those are always hilarious. So if you could sum up your Twitter account in a short amount of time, how would you do that?
It's a lot of bad jokes. It's about a lot of self-degradating humor. I hope asking for my wife to love me again. And so, and being vaguely condescending when I find a bad opinion without like often correcting it, like would be the big thing. Probably like I see a bad take and then I'll put, I don't know. They're cartoons. Sometimes people think I draw them. I don't. I'm very flattered that people think I'm talented enough to that. I find them on the internet, but be very always offer an alternative. It's kind of my thing. I'm very opinionated on things I am opinionated about, but pro wrestling, football, hoping my wife comes back. That's probably about the high spots. Yeah.
I can promise you at some point, Owen, she will text you back. So I do appreciate you stopping by in between text messages to her. Like I said, follow him on Twitter at Reese Draft. Hopefully the Packers pick a couple of guys and we can do this after they grab a couple dudes from the Shrine Bowl. But
hopefully the internet works.
Yeah, that would be great. All right, Owen Reese, everybody, as always, signing off here. Appreciate you, Owen, and you have a good rest of your week. Owen Reese, of course, like I mentioned, you can follow him on Twitter at Reese Draft. I apologize for some of the technical issues throughout the show there. That's just the nature of the world that we live in, right? But that's okay. We'll kind of fight through that a little bit here. So, Jake, real quick, just in terms of, I think the biggest thing that I want to discuss based on what Owen had to say to us was when I asked him about Yosh Neyman, he was talking about how Yosh shouldn't be a reason that you don't pick somebody. And we've talked about that before. Just how like different guys can, like, you can count on this guy as a building block moving forward, right? Mm-hmm. Like, so Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback. So they're not going to pick a quarterback early because they have the league MVP, just as a really elementary bad example to go on.
And they did that anyways.
And then they did that anyway. So damn it. How did I end up walking into that? But yeah. Okay. So just as an example like that, but when you talk about Yosh, he basically said, like, Yosh is not a reason to not try and address swing tackle, right tackle, anything like that, and kind of keep rolling that way. So just what were your thoughts on that? What were your thoughts on Neyman's play throughout the year?
Yeah, I think Nijman is just like your swing tackle. I think that's like their hope for him, right? Is like we hope we have a guy that can back up left tackle and right tackle at a high level, which I think they have that. And I think that's a super, super valuable commodity in today's NFL. A lot of teams don't have one tackle. I mean, they really don't. And the Packers legitimately have two on the roster in Bakhtiari and Jenkins. And then I think Yosh can be that third guy. So I think if they would draft a tackle high, it would be with the mindset that they want to keep Elton inside, because as of right now, like he is part of your best five, and I think he's one of your best two tackles on the roster. Now, he might be an all-pro guard, but if you're a above average tackle, which, I mean, man, last year when he played tackle, I thought he was top five. I really thought he was fantastic. And yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think there are some metrics that would agree with that as well. I think there's a point in time last year where our pals at Pro Football Focus had him ranked as a top 5 left tackle in the NFL, just from a pass blocking perspective. So I think he's good. I think he's going to be all right. Granted, I led this show off with saying I don't really know I don't know jack squat about offensive line play, other than if you're getting beat really, really badly often, I know you're bad. Other than that, though, I don't pay that close of attention to it. And Yosh also, like in those terms, is a guy too. He doesn't get beat. Like, he doesn't get beat so bad that you notice him. That's like the highest compliment I can give offensive linemen is like, if I don't notice you're out there, you must be doing a great job. And that's kind of where Yosh landed with me last year. So I think it'll be interesting to see what they do at that position, because they have options. There's a lot of stuff up in the air. One thing I am certain of is they have 5 dudes that can play, but where are they going to play them? You know, that's I think what the beautiful mystery is going to be this offseason for us, Jacob.
I never heard that phrase again. That would be way too soon for anything like that. So
real quick, just say it every week.
Thank you. A couple takes that I have on that. First, Elton Jenkins. I agree with Owen from the standpoint of his best position is left guard. That doesn't mean his best position for the Packers is left guard. And he may very well end up being the right tackle. And he's going to get paid like a tackle. His contract is going to be a complicated one for the reasons that we've talked about a bunch. Yosh Neyman specifically, throughout the year, I mean, obviously, like, he did well. I'm not saying he didn't. You know, Owen, I think, said pleasantly surprised. I think that's a really good way to describe Yosh Neyman, is that I was pleasantly surprised, because I remember when Jenkins couldn't play against San Francisco in the first matchup between those two teams, I was like,
I was on to the next one.
let's
just not get anybody hurt. Yeah.
Okay, so 1 and 2 and moving forward, and I thought Nick Bosa was going to eat Yosh Neyman, and then by extension Aaron Rodgers, and he didn't. And Yosh did a good job. I think that my worry with him going forward is, 1, now the league has a full season's worth of tape on him, and 2, he's really, really small. Like, his shoulders are just so small. And like, I mean, that doesn't mean he can't be a good player, obviously, but there are a lot of things that go into, you know, playing offensive line and playing it well throughout the course of a year. And I just don't know, you know, he's not going to move anybody in the run game. And that's one of my concerns with him being the right tackle, whether short or long term. And
Packers don't care about that.
Maybe they don't, but
maybe they should. So maybe they should care. That's why we talked a lot about AJ Dillon being a BYOB.
Bring your own blocker.
Bring your own blocker.
Yeah, absolutely. So I agree with Owen from the standpoint of Yosh is somebody that I think is a good enough player, but not somebody that, if they really like one of those tackles at 28th overall, like, that's the soonest the Packers can pick a tackle for me, is 28th overall. And I wouldn't be surprised if that is the route they go, especially with, and I wanted them to keep Billy Turner because I have more faith in him than I do in Yosh Neyman, and kind of pointed out here, you know, the Packers really right now only have 6 guys that can play. And I mean, just going through the top of my head here, they've got obviously their preferred starting 5. And then I think Elton Jenkins is the other one, but
can we just stop and realize how spoiled that comment is?
Yeah, that is. I mean,
do you understand that offensive line play is like the hardest thing to find in the NFL? Because And it starts in youth football. Hey, you're big and athletic. How about you come play defense? Like, because that's where a lot of those guys end up, and it kind of continues to go that way. Like, why is Jordan Davis not playing offensive tackle? You know what I mean? Like, because someone saw that he was a freak and put him at D tackle. So to say the Packers have 6 guys that can play, that's more than most teams in the NFL. I mean, watch the preseason, right? Watch the preseason. Watch the second, third, fourth quarter. Look at some of the dudes that are getting trotted out there, and you will realize quickly how. And like someone said, Steno is a wizard, absolutely, because he and Butkus and what they've been able to do in Green Bay for a long time is emphasize offensive line play. We are spoiled because they are good at developing those guys. Not every team is. So 6 guys that can play, that's a lot. And they're going to add 2. They're going to add 2 in the draft.
3 more than can play on a lot of teams.
Yeah,
like that is. It just is.
Lucas Patrick, for example, is someone that in Green Bay, yeah, he's okay. He's fine. Some guys don't like him, you know.
And there are Bear fans at my job that are fired up about the fact that
they should be. And they honestly should, because he's an average offensive lineman, and he's gonna solidify a spot for them, and they will welcome that. And that's just what I mean. Is like, we are so spoiled in Green Bay to be like, Lucas Patrick, we can do better. When a lot of teams in the NFL go, boom, you're starting for the next 4 years. Like, we love you, you know? So, I mean, It's just, it is something.
Yeah, we're talking about Royce Newman as a potential liability throughout the course of the season. A lot of other teams would be like, a rookie 4th-round pick is doing this. I'm thrilled. It's fine.
Sign me up. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know a lot of conversation has been had about how the Packers are spoiled at the quarterback position, and that is true. But it's also true they've been spoiled really at the tackles, because really in my lifetime, you have the dudes with Favre and Bruce Wilkerson, and then Chad Clifton.
Tauscher to Bakhtiari, Bulaga.
And then Bakhtiari, Bulaga, and
Billy Turner, and Elton Jenkins is probably going to be really good. I pretty much have just penciled him in there at tackle, even though you guys can be wrong about that, about him not being a great tackle.
Yeah, and this is a good point, True North. They have. It is an experience, but I will tell you this. Here's my word of caution if you want it. Every year since Brian Gutekunst has been the general manager, signed at least 1 free agent, and he's drafted at least 1 guy in each draft. He's drafted 3 in each of the last 2 drafts on the offensive line. Now, that's not going to help the experience side of things, but are they going to sign a swing tackle? I would imagine they do at some point. Maybe that's Brian Bulaga. I know I brought that up yesterday that was controversial. Some people said yeah, some people said no. I'm not asking for Bulaga to start, but if you put him in that Wagner / Dennis Kelly role, I think that's probably better than a lot of other guys that are maybe he's not better than Dennis Kelly. I don't know.
Hey, do we have a breaking news siren? We have breaking news.
What's the breaking news?
Per Tom Silverstein, to get under the salary cap, the Packers cut wide receiver Randall Cobb's salary by about $5.5 million. He was due to make around $8.5 million in total salary. He now will make $3 million, according to a league source. They had to have made another move too, because that wasn't enough.
Evidently it was, because that was that's the only thing that is being reported as of now. So there you go. Randall Cobb is going to be back in Green Bay. So you have now, at a low number, less money. He's making less money than Alan Lazard. So not going to be, he'll be making less money than Devontae Adams too. There's also that. I'm sure you guys are going to be surprised to hear that. But when it comes to Cobb, like, I would say just add his money to the Aaron Rodgers cap charge, and just say instead of a $28 million cap hit, it's a $31 million cap hit, because Cobb wouldn't be here if Aaron Rodgers wasn't. So that's fine.
That's a good way to look.
Cobb's a vet. Maybe if he's able to be healthy for the stretch of the season next year, maybe he can help them in a playoff game. I do wonder if he was healthier, would he have been able to help the team in that game against San Francisco, but being in his first game back against something like that. There's that. And then we got another point here. Here's something else, Jake, as far as how that goes. So Cobb's pay cut, and then Campbell's deal has yet to be turned in. So Devondre Campbell has re-signed.
Devondre he had void money that was on the cap. Is that right?
Yeah, and that was it. So his new contract though hasn't hit yet. So there's going to be there's more stuff they're going to have to do. I could tell you on this show specifically, we are not going to worry about the salary cap because we don't know how it works. And I think if there's anything we've learned over the last 2 years is nobody, even ones that claim to know how it works, know how it works unless his name is Russ Ball. And that's why I'm not worried. Like when people talk about Aaron Rodgers' contract and his cap hit and everything like that for years from now, I just don't care because I think I've learned the last 2 years that it doesn't matter.
Hey, let me ask you, 3 years, what was the Packers salary cap situation 3 years ago, Jacob?
Really good. I mean,
but do you know specifically? I'm saying, so like,
No.
why are we projecting 3 years in advance? Like, we have no idea what it's going to look like. We have no idea what they can do or what they will do. We don't know what the language of these contracts are. We know the numbers. But the things that go in these contracts are not just numbers. I don't know if people realize that. But
yeah, and it's we barely even know the numbers. Like honestly, we barely even know the numbers. So that's the reality that we live in as well. I think the breaking news there, I guess Cobb's going to be back. Now my concern is how do you make that receiving room better? Because right now it's worse than it was last year. And because Marquez Valdez-Scantling's not coming back. And you're going to have your top three right now are Alan Lazard, Devontae Adams, theoretically, and Randall Cobb. So Cobb's fine. He's a vet. That's certainly going to help. And at $3 million, 1 year, $3 million contract, if the Packers signed a free agent like that at 1 year, $3 million, it'd be like, okay, that's fine.
You'd probably be like, he might not make the team. Nah, he would. $3 million a year, they'd probably make the team. But to get to your point about the receiver room being not as good too, like they don't have any like buddy in the pipeline either. Amari,
nope.
Like cool. I mean, but Amari is now kind of canceled out by Randall. You're not going to get both those guys on the field at the same time. So I don't know. That will be interesting how they handle the wide receiver position, and that would be where I would say they might make a splash in free agency for some immediate returns on investment, because that's a position that takes a minute to develop. Yeah, that one. Olabe's ready to roll. I'd take him in a heartbeat.
That's a big discussion for a different day, but we were talking about the offensive line tonight. I appreciate you guys indulging us to sit and talk about real football players, because I think as much as we discuss the sexy positions in your fantasy football stuff, this is where the game's won, guys, in the trenches on both sides of the ball too. And we'll be next week. We'll be talking about a couple different things. Next week, we are talking about the pass rushers, and that is going to be my favorite episode because I love pass rushers. So I'm excited for next week. I'm excited to have this conversation again after the Packers draft a couple guys, but they're going to be able to add that. Check us out on Twitter. I'm at Jacob Westendorf. He's at Jacob Morley. You can follow everything over at GameOnWI on Twitter. Find us on Facebook. Find us on YouTube. And check that Green Bay draft guide on the link right beneath me here as we're going here. Appreciate everything that you guys have done for us all offseason, and I'm looking forward to even more as this offseason plugs along. We know the team's going to be good next year, so that certainly makes things a lot easier when it comes to the offseason if you know they're going to be a good team. So thank you guys for listening. Appreciate you guys stopping in, and we will see you next week talking about the guys that hit the quarterback. Hopefully the Packers have added one between now and then. Go Pack.